Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally strapping in to explore one of the most high-stakes, action-packed environments known to science, and it's right inside your own body. We are going to be looking at the intense, relentless, and absolutely vital world of how our bodies manage toxic waste. Every single second of every day, your cells are performing billions of chemical reactions just to keep you alive. But those reactions produce some seriously dangerous byproducts. And if we didn't have a microscopic filtration factory working around the clock to clean up that mess, well, things would get very bad very quickly. Seriously, think about it for a second. What would actually happen if your cells just couldn't take out the trash? It's really not a pretty picture. If the waste products from all that metabolism are allowed to build up, they become incredibly toxic. Carbon dioxide, for instance, dissolves in water to form an acidic solution that drops the pH of your cells and completely sabotages your body's enzymes. But honestly, even wilder is the osmotic effect. If waste builds up, your body fluids become heavily concentrated. This causes water to violently shift around, which means your cells can literally swell up and burst, a process called lysis, or they can completely dehydrate and die. It really is a matter of life or death on a microscopic scale. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the toxic waste problem. 2. Our organs of excretion. 3. The Osmoregulation Balancing Act. 4. Inside the filtration machine. And finally, 5. Decoding your urine. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, the toxic waste problem, and figure out exactly what it is we're desperately trying to get rid of. Before we go any further, though, we absolutely have to bust a massive myth. When you think of body waste, you probably instantly think of the bathroom, right? But biologically speaking, feces is completely different from metabolic waste. Feces is primarily just undigested food that passed right through your digestive tract. It was never actually involved in your cell's metabolic reactions at all. Because of that, getting rid of it is called egestion, not excretion. Excretion is strictly the removal of waste substances created by the actual metabolic reactions happening inside your cells, along with toxic materials and things we just have way too much of. To kind of put human excretion into perspective, let's take a quick look at plants. Plants have metabolic reactions too, of course, but their waste timetable shifts dramatically between day and night. During the day, they're super busy photosynthesizing, so they actually produce more oxygen than they need for respiration. That means oxygen is their daytime waste product. But at night, when there's no light for photosynthesis, they only respire, so suddenly carbon dioxide becomes the waste product. For plants, these waste gases just diffuse right out of the leaves through tiny pores called stomata. It's this really elegant, totally passive system. Now, humans, we're a little more complicated. Our cells are constantly undergoing aerobic respiration, which spits out carbon dioxide and water as waste. But there is another major culprit we have to deal with, and that's urea. What's really interesting here is where this urea actually comes from. When you eat protein, it's broken down into amino acids. But your body can't actually store excess amino acids. So your liver jumps into action, breaking down those extras to produce urea. And let me tell you, urea is extremely toxic. If that builds up in your bloodstream, you are in serious trouble. So how do we get it out? That brings us to section 2, our organs of excretion. As you can see, we don't just have one organ doing all this dirty work. We've got a whole specialized cleanup crew. First off, your lungs handle the carbon dioxide and some water vapor every single time you exhale. Then there's your skin. When you sweat, you aren't just cooling down, you're actually excreting water, excess mineral ions like sodium, and even small amounts of that urea we talked about. But the absolute stars of the show, for sure, it's your 2 kidneys. They are the master filters, relentlessly pulling water, mineral ions, and that highly toxic urea straight out of your blood. But here's the thing. The kidneys aren't just dumb filters taking out the trash. They're performing this incredibly precise calculation every second of the day. Let's look at section 3, the Osmoregulation Balancing Act. To really appreciate what your kidneys are pulling off, you've got to understand a process called osmoregulation. This is the process of maintaining the exact right water and salt concentrations across the membranes inside your body. It is a textbook classic example of homeostasis, your body's constant drive to keep its internal environment perfectly stable. Why is it so important? Well, because the cytoplasm inside every single one of your cells and the plasma in your blood is mostly made of water. If you lose or gain even a little too much water, things go terribly wrong. The stakes of osmosis are quite literally life or death. If you look at this, you'll see that if your blood has too little water, it becomes highly concentrated with solutes. Because of that, water will actually be sucked out of your red blood cells, causing them to completely shrivel up and die. On the flip side, if you have way too much water in your blood, it floods right into your cells. They swell up like water balloons until they completely lyse, which means they burst. So the crucial takeaway here is that your body absolutely must keep the water levels perfectly balanced right in the middle. And honestly, that is the kidney's main job. So how exactly do the kidneys pull off this delicate balancing act while simultaneously taking out the trash? Let's zoom in on section 4, inside the filtration machine. Let's literally trace the journey here. It all starts with the renal arteries, which bring high-pressure, unfiltered blood straight from your aorta right into your 2 kidneys, which are tucked at the back of your abdomen. The kidneys do their magic, filtering the blood and creating urine. This urine then flows down these 2 tubes called ureters into the bladder, which, is really just a holding tank. When it's time, the urine exits the body through a final tube called the urethra. But to see the real magic itself, we've got to look way, way closer at the kidney tissue. Inside each kidney, you've got about 1 million microscopic filtration units called nephrons. Think of them as individual, highly efficient assembly lines. First, blood enters a knot of capillaries called the glomerulus. The pressure in there is intense. It actually forces small molecules like water, glucose, and urea out of the blood and into the Bowman's capsule, acting exactly like a sieve. This step is called ultrafiltration. Next, the liquid travels through a twisted tube called the PCT. This is where your body frantically reabsorbs all the good stuff it accidentally filtered out, like all the glucose. Then, the remaining fluid travels down the long loop of Henle. And finally, it arrives at the collecting duct, which is where the last, most crucial adjustments to your water levels are made. Now, here's a really fascinating clinical insight that doctors use all the time. In a perfectly healthy person, absolutely no large protein molecules should ever make it into the nephron. They're simply just too big to pass through that high-pressure glomerulus sieve. And all the glucose should be completely reabsorbed back into your blood at that PCT stage we just talked about. Therefore, if someone has protein in their urine, it usually means their blood pressure was so dangerously high that it actually damaged the glomerulus filter. And if they have glucose in their urine, well, that's a prime indicator of diabetes, meaning their blood glucose was so incredibly high that the nephron just couldn't reabsorb it all. Okay, so let's check out the final stage of the nephron and see how this builds into that osmoregulation balancing act. The amount of water you actually pee out is controlled by a hormone called ADH, which basically acts like a biological seesaw. Deep in your brain, the hypothalamus detects exactly how much water is in your blood. If your blood is too concentrated, meaning you're dehydrated, it signals the pituitary gland to release more ADH. ADH makes the walls of the kidney's collecting duct highly permeable, so your body reabsorbs that precious water back into the blood, and you get a tiny amount of very concentrated urine. Conversely, if you've been chugging a ton of water, your brain drops the ADH levels. The collecting duct stays sealed up, the water isn't saved, and you produce a large volume of very dilute urine. This invisible communication between your brain and your kidneys is happening constantly. Which brings us beautifully to our final section, decoding your urine. Let's see how all this microscopic science translates to what you actually see in the bathroom. When you see pale yellow urine, that's a direct result of low ADH in your system. Your body had plenty of water, so it just let a large quantity pass right through the collecting duct. Because there's so much water in there, the toxic urea we talked about earlier is highly diluted. But if your urine is a dark yellow or orange, that's your body running on high ADH. Your brain basically hit the panic button about low water levels, instructed the kidneys to reabsorb all the water they possibly could, and what's left over is a very small quantity of liquid with a highly, highly concentrated amount of urea. So what actually shifts this concentration? It's constantly changing based on 3 main variables. The first one is obvious, your water intake. The more fluids you drink, the paler the urine. But the other 2 are temperature and exercise. And why is that? It's because of your skin. When it's super hot outside, or when you're working out heavily, your body produces vast amounts of sweat to keep you cool. And remember, sweat is largely water. Because you're losing so much water through your skin, your brain detects that drop, pumps out a ton of ADH, and forces the kidneys to hoard whatever water is left inside you. The result? Darker, highly concentrated urine. So as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with a completely new perspective. The next time you look in the toilet bowl, don't just flush and forget it. I want you to ask yourself, what is my brain telling my kidneys right now? Because that color isn't just waste. It's a direct visual readout of a microscopic high-stakes communication loop happening inside you. a relentless effort by your biological filtration factory to keep you perfectly balanced and perfectly alive. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.